In 2000, I brought together a great team of 3 performers to make a show called Caravan of Lies, which was again designed by Richard Loden and composed by John Avery, alongside quite a lot of Polish folk music that I'd found and bought in Poland when I was working out there. And the set for Caravan of Lies, as usual, was designed before the performers showed up by Richard with my input. And what that offered was a performance space within a performance space, a round stage that was alluding to a circus ring. And then we dressed the set with a lot of hanging objects, which became a metaphor for suspense and hanging and wading through stuff. Very cluttered set, probably the most cluttered set, deliberately so. And within the hanging was a trapeze, and within the set was a set of mirrors that distorted the action. So there were lots of pockets, areas where different actions would happen. And in a way, it was quite easy to conceptualise where would be the performance aspect and where would be the backstage bickering. And one of the things I wanted to explore in Caravan of Lies, hence the title, is how as a performer you can put on a show, but the stuff that's going on behind the facade, behind the grease paint, is often much more complex. So this was a show about people that had been working together for too long, a bully of a ringmaster, played by Stuart Lodge again, which in a way was an extension of his role in Falling as the Eggman, a clearer role. And 3 performers who were under his spell, if you like, unable to leave and move on, like a circus family, but deeply unhappy with the restrictions of remaining. So in a way, what we were exploring in Caravan of Lies is how when you're a performer, it's quite an odd life. You're quite locked in to the family that you're with when you're making a piece of work, and the outside world sort of disappears. But that can very quickly turn into something quite dark and emotionally challenging and very wrapped up in itself. And what we were doing was taking that and placing those emotional threads onto a stage, as well as looking at very gestural work, some lovely group dances to Polish folk music, quite a lot of slapstick, and quite a lot of images where the performers wanted to lift themselves out of this mess that they found themselves in. So in a way, Caravan of Lies was the first time that I tried to make explicit the self-consciousness of performance, beyond the direct address of being in the fiction and talking to the audience, but also this is our world, this is a representation, a very heightened, dark and bullying representation of our world, and we're stuck in it. And at that time we weren't actually that old as performers, but we were already, I think, maybe feeling that to become a performer and to live this life as artists working in performance, it's a trudge, it's a long mire of a journey where you get wrapped up in each other's lives, and it's quite difficult to extricate yourself from that. In terms of interdisciplinarity within Caravan of Lies, it's probably one of the more successful blending of many different forms. So there was this very complex, visually complex set, which also housed the ability to go up on a trapeze, to dance on a stage within a stage, and offered places to hide away from performance. There was a mix of music, of original music made by John Avery again, and found Polish music, Polish folk music that I'd bought over in Gdańsk. And then the performers that I invited were all quite different. So Stuart Lodge, who is a comic cabaret-esque performer, street performer, became the ringmaster. Peter Shenton, who has gone on to form his own company and is well known for his comic performances, in this show was quite a gentle male figure. And I worked with Pete because he'd stepped into Harry's role in Falling from the High Rise of Love and worked very well with TC as a duet partnership. So we took that duet partnering forward from falling into Caravan of Lies. And then TC was there and wanting to explore more dancing, wanting to explore objects more and how to use them to shift choreography and engage in duet work. And then the fourth performer was the extraordinary Iona Cuny, who is still making work now and has gone on to work with Ultima Vez and Wim van der Kuibus and many fantastic European companies. But at the time, I think she'd been making her own work and working with a few other companies in the UK, but I can't remember where I met her, but she is extraordinary. She's double jointed, she's a gymnast, she can cling off things that most of us wouldn't even dream of, but she's very tiny and very, very strong, not unlike TC. So we developed a role with Iona that was quite an animalistic, feral kind of role, where we took full advantage of the fact that she's double jointed and that she can make herself very small. She can move in an extraordinarily knotted way, very low to the floor. And one of her roles within the piece was to be this kind of almost like a dog figure, a sort of feral child figure that then at one point was given the ability by TC to grow into a sort of distorted ballet dancer in pointe shoes. So it was all a bit dysfunctional, all quite dark characters wanting to escape this kind of dog child mess of a thing that Iona played that wasn't really allowed to grow up. And that's another comment on the dance world, really, as performers. You're not really allowed to grow up. So we sort of kept her quite contained. And her incredible physicality brought a lot to the work. Interestingly, she was then replaced in that role for a second tour by Aurora Lubos, who has since become a very long-standing member of the company. And very interesting for Aurora to try and fit into Iona's unique body material. She really is unique. But Aurora did a great job of recreating that role later. Anyway, interdisciplinarity, I suppose, within the work existed through these very different movement languages that each performer brought to their roles in the work. Stuart brought a lot of text, which we wrote together, quite vitriolic, dark text, quite bullying text. And again, I suppose I was indicating that when you are the director of a group of people, it's sometimes not by any means necessary, but you do use different tactics to get what you want from a group of people in terms of get a performance out of it. So I think in a way Stuart represented that role that is about manipulating a performance out of people, which is very close to the bone for me, obviously, because that's what we sort of do as directors. Stuart's role as a sort of compere / ringmaster / father figure / quite dysfunctional bully, I suppose was, because the piece talked about performance in the widest sense, I suppose in a way acted as a metaphor for the role of the director, in this case me, and how one cajoles and pushes and strikes away at getting the performance that you need to make the piece work from but the performers that are collaborating with you. And as I said, I think Caravan was beginning to articulate this sort of slightly postmodern thing about we're in it, but we know what we're doing, and we're talking to you about what we're doing as we're doing it a little bit. I think that started to emerge much more later. But there's certainly something about being stuck in a group of performers, the tensions within that group, the emotional threads that bind you to the people that you're working with, even if you don't like some of them. I'm lucky to have worked with people that I generally really like because I choose who I work with, so that's really great. But you know, the tensions that exist within a group are part of what you manage as a director. It's not only the work. And so in a way I was making explicit that psychology within a group on stage, and a lot of the press reviews picked up on that dark, menacing locking in that you do to create quite a dysfunctional family in order to make work. Richard designed the set, and my memory is that I collected all the objects for the set. And that was quite interesting because it's very cluttered as a kind of metaphor for how your world closes in on you when you're in the making process, or if you're in performance. It's all around you and above you and you're in it, and it's sort of inescapable, really. And the circus obviously is alluding to a lot of the way we live is quite like being in a travelling circus practically, but also there's a lot of humour, but there is this dark undercurrent of being stuck together with this kind of performance glue on stage and off stage. In terms of the objects, I did a lot of finding found objects in and around Sheffield, in old salvage yards and antique shops. And Rich and I had quite good fun actually making this set. I think it was the first time we integrated lighting into the set, so the little stage had bulbs all the way around it that really made it a performance area within a performance area. And that was something that was new and that was destroyed towards the end of the work. I think it was very cluttered because we wanted to create zones for private and public acts. So there was this backstage area that you could see where Stuart was quite abusive to the little dog girl, Iona. And that was quite alarming because it was furthest away from the audience, furthest away from the mother and father or the lovers figures that TC and Pete were playing. So there were certain zones that Richard and I created through having a lot of stuff that could hide things, could reveal only partly reveal things, or this performance area that was lit that could make things very explicit. So I guess what we were playing with as well was light and shade, shadows, stuff happening that you're not supposed to see, which, funnily enough, sort of alluded to abuse, actually. The dog girl figure was quite an abused figure, I think, in this. So although it wasn't directly about gender politics, there was still this sort of dark undercurrent of how we treat people. The end of Caravan also became the end of a working relationship with Stuart. I think we sort of burnt ourselves out a bit with him playing a figure that was maybe tapping into certain things in his own psyche that weren't easy to manage, which often happens with the way that I work, actually. He's not alone in that. I think that had happened with Harry after making Nolly May Tangere. It certainly happened with me over and over again. It happened with TC later. And it's yet to happen with some of my more longer-standing relationships. But I think there's something about a shelf life of how much, when you mine your soul, how much you can take, actually, working the way that we do. Sounds a bit dramatic, but because we're using our own emotional states to create material, I think you reach a point where you want to stop. So what we didn't take forward was, because we felt we'd done it twice with the Eggman and with the compare, Stuart and I did actually then stop working together. What did emerge very strongly was wanting to continue working with TC and wanting to continue working with Pete Shenton, which we then did in a new collaboration in Poland. And actually Aurora, who had replaced Iona, was also part of that mix, and the three of us went forward to make Drop Dead Gorgeous together as a collaboration with another dance theatre company in Poland.